Quite often people ask us where the female influences are, and of course the only female influence is cadaverous there, but I don't know. I mean, we could come up with a lot of interesting kinds of things that emerge from that. Maybe it's just that Toby and I were rather diseased human beings, for all I know. What happens to society without the influence or the feminine influence? We could have a heyday with that one, but I think I'll leave it to someone else. I was working as an illustrator at the time we were writing it, and I'd work during the day as an illustrator and then go over to Toby's house at night, and we'd work a good portion of the night. In terms of the way I treated some of the characters in the films and writing the script, there was a case in Houston, and I'm not sure that it was ever called anything in particular, but the character that attracted me, or that influenced some of the things that I did in the script, was a guy named Elmer Wayne Henley. Do you want to go into history of this deal, talk about this whole case? Okay, all right, well, what had occurred was that Elmer Wayne was the procurer for an older man. Elmer Wayne would lure young men to the ghoul's kitchen, so to speak, and the older man and Elmer Wayne would participate as well, would have sexual relations with these young men, and then the young men would be murdered. There was actually a third young man that was involved that also acted to some degree as a procurer, as did Elmer Wayne. And what precipitated the police discovering what was going on was the murder of the second young man. And Elmer Wayne became fearful that the older man would murder him too, and so he, I believe he went to the police at that point. But subsequent to the discovery of all of this, the police were carting Elmer Wayne around the Houston area, and he was pointing out where all the bodies were buried or had been discarded along the various roadways. And somehow or another, the local news were following them around and were able to get very close to Elmer Wayne. And some news reporter in some little sketch I saw stuck on a microphone in front of Elmer Wayne, who was like 17 years old, skinny little kid, and asked him, how he felt about all this and what he was going to do now that he'd been apprehended. And Elmer Wayne kind of drew himself up to his full height, which must have been all of, about 5'5" or 5'6", poked out his skinny little chest and allowed us howl that he was going to take his medicine like a man. And it was just the kind of odd conjunction of the two senses of morality that struck me. Here was this guy had been involved in this horrendous serial murder spree, yet he had imbued in him from some source this sense that if one did wrong, then one stood up and accepted one's punishment like a man. So it was kind of what I called a moral schizophrenia, and it employed it with some of the characters in the script. Warren Scarron, who I knew through Ron Bozeman. Ron Bozeman was a friend of mine, and he and Warren had been classmates at Rice. And Warren at the time was the commissioner at the Texas Film Commission. And I went to Warren and brought the script to him, and he put it in the hands of a few people, and that generated some interest. And we went around and solicited everybody we could think of who had more than a couple of coins to scrape together. I mean, even my younger sister invested a few bucks in it. We didn't really do any festival screenings, as I recall, not prior to getting a distribution deal. We had very, very few contacts. The world was a different place then than it is now. You have to recall that there was no video. Either you got a film into a theater or it just died and it was never seen. So you can imagine we were filmmaker wannabes, you know, with no contacts essentially in industry, or very, very few. So it was very difficult to get it in front of anybody. At a certain point, Warren Scarron became involved, and he had developed some contacts as a result of having been the Texas Film Commissioner, and it was ultimately through some of his contacts that we did make a distribution deal. 2 and 3 had not worked very well, and we felt like we could kind of revive the film. To tell you the truth, you know, I'm not all that big a horror film fan. I mean, I like some horror films, but those two just didn't interest me, and it's not because they were so much as they were sequels. I didn't find them very interesting. You know, you would think if you cast a couple of unknowns in a film that and then they down the line become major stars, that it would, you know, have a positive effect on it, but quite the contrary was the case. And I don't know what all is in the background of it, what the source of the problems are, but clearly there was some desire on the part of some forces to see that their involvement was minimized. Paul Partain, who played Franklin in the original, the guy in the wheelchair, he's in a cameo, and John Dugan, who played the grandfather in the original, was also in a cameo in that scene that Marilyn appears in. She's on a gurney. The gurney's being pushed by Paul Partain, who is Franklin, and the cop in the scene is John Dugan without grandfather makeup. We were completely outside the mainstream of Hollywood, and we didn't know it at the time, but that was probably enormously beneficial. In retrospect, I think it was anyway. But what I have learned subsequently is that virtually anything that goes through that system goes through a process of homogenization. It's inevitable. And we didn't go through that. And so the very rawness of Chainsaw was unique, extraordinary, remarkable, and untempered by that process of homogenization. And I think that came through. I think that was unique, and it worked. I mean, beyond that, you could have all those qualities in a film could not work nonetheless, but the fact that it did and worked, I think, is largely responsibility for its enduring qualities.